The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me from way out west in Idaho is Bryan Byrd. How are you doing today, Bryan?
Hey, Paul, doing great. Hey, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here and connect once again.
Yeah, man, it's been a while. I think we did Legends of the Fall, right?
Yeah, Legends of the
Probably
Fall.
like 2 years ago. You were one of my first guests, I think, connected through Morgan.
Yeah, a couple falls ago.
Yeah. So a little intro to Bryan, because for this specific episode, it was our conversation that triggered my idea to do this series using Band of Brothers as a sort of an arc, a sort of roadmap on the masculine initiation. And that was triggered by a conversation that I overheard you having with Morgan, right? It started at the Wild Heart podcast and then the BGS podcast on the fires, the groups that you have. And man, they could use fires in Bastogne, man. That was a cold experience. So I just wanted to sort of invite you to share a little bit about that conversation about the fires and what that is, as well as what you're doing with Wild Courage out there in Idaho.
Sure, Paul. Thank you. About 3 years ago, in the middle of COVID, we noticed guys were getting disconnected. They were unplugging from everything. Everything was shutting down. And all of a sudden you had a bunch of guys going at life alone, without hope, some without jobs. Some relationships were breaking up fast. And you'll hear John Eldridge talk about it, but desolation just kind of swept the planet, left a lot of hopeless guys. And we were led through prayer and a couple of guys and I to get together, and a guy named Jeremy Morris and Mike Evenson. We got together in Jeremy's barn out in a place called Emmett, Idaho, believe it or not. And he had a dream. He had a dream that this barn it was old, dilapidated, many years ago, and he rebuilt it. And he rebuilt it so it could bring together guys so he could give hope to the hopeless man. And out of COVID, there was a lot of hopelessness going on. And we decided that, remember that. Some of it's still going on.
Good thing it's all gone now. Everybody's good now, right?
Yeah, everybody's good. And out of that, we had a lot of guys come to that fire where they couldn't come anywhere else. They came to connect and be seen and share their story around a fire. Sometimes it was in the barn, sometimes it was outside when the weather cooperated. And we still do that. We do it 3 times a month. And we do that to give guys a safe place to share their story. Not only the good, we have joy where there's joy, right? And we mourn with those who mourn. And we just sit in the tension of life and where it is, what's happening, what's going on. We give a place where people can be themselves and can share what's happening, can share healing stories, can share stories where they need help. And we allow other guys to come around them and support them in their walk with God, with their hearts, and really give hope to the hopeless man. That's what we're all about. And we started in Emmett and then, of course, connected with Morgan and the guys at Wild Heart, and they caught fire with it. And Morgan's been pushing the fire initiative. And I think Wild Heart has a map up. And I'm pretty sure there's over 300 fires plus right now.
That's awesome.
I know you're doing fire stuff down, on the East Coast, and we've got 30 to 40 of them around different states in the West that are loosely related to Wild Heart, Wild Courage. There's Being Sons and Jay Heck's been doing it for 8 years, and everywhere we go,
having a fire down in San Antonio is hardcore.
Right? It's about once a year, February. That's it.
It gets cold enough for a fire. The rest of the time, it just happens. They just put wood out in the middle of the field, and it catches fire down there.
Yeah, we're putting fires out.
And so you see, like, to me, as you're describing it, I was like, man, especially from the text messaging that we've done, sort of preparing for this conversation, what you just described is what we see in this episode of the Band of Brothers of Bastogne, where you've got guys who are ill-equipped, isolated, spread thin. They don't have enough ammo. They don't have enough clothes. Eugene, who the medic that this episode focuses on, is going around, doesn't have enough bandages, doesn't even have scissors. You're looking for morphine, looking for anything, plasma. What a great picture of those men that you were just describing there 3 years ago. The guys who are untethered, who are isolated, and your heart for. I mean, in a lot of ways, you take the role of Eugene as you're trying to reach out to these guys and connect them to a greater story.
Oh, 100%, Paul. We were, Eugene's the medic in the Battle of Bastogne. For those who haven't seen it, I know you're going to go out and watch it after Paul describes it so well here. But yeah, we were medics, and guys were coming in hurt to the fire. They're coming in disgruntled, without jobs. In the Battle of Bastogne, guys come in confused and fog. There's gaps, and they're wounded. Some of them have one bullet per man. Yeah. Guys are walking out and they're walking in, and they got one bullet. They're like you said, they're taking plasma away. What's ironic is that everybody needs plasma because they're all getting blown up. So why are you're taking it away to bandage the guy next to you, but you're going to get blown up next. It was so brutal. And that's how it was when we started the fires. It was just so brutal. Guys were coming in broken relationships, broken jobs, industries being shut down, economy, the world being put on halt for there. And there was a great need. There was a great need for care, for some clarity in the confusion. There was great need to get our bearings and our story, like why we're surrounded by suffering, and what do we do? Where do we fall? What is our fallback position? Who's the medic in our story, and where do we get right when there's suffering all around? Now the guys in Bastogne, they're getting bombed. Their tanks are rolling in. They're out of, like you said, out of bullets. They're cold. They're freezing. And one of the guys is a Garnier who's peeing needles because he's got some sort of VD from previous episodes, right? So, some of them got trench foot. Their feet are getting so cold, and their socks are wet, and they didn't take care of their feet, and they don't leave. They don't leave. And
they're like, I can't leave the front. And this is a dude. He's like, I took my boots off to dry out my socks, and that's when we got hit by artillery. I have no idea where my boots are, and he's walking around in the snow in Germany in December. Right. Or I guess probably, I'm not sure where Bastogne is. It's probably not quite Germany. But like that idea, like he's walking around without boots on because they got blown up. Yeah. Because he's trying to do the right thing. And we see that even later at the scene when Eugene goes back, and even Captain Winters is like, hey, go get a hot meal. And we'll talk about this a little later, how he shows up and his bastion of hope, his one place where he felt somebody cared about him, was blown up, and she was gone. And it's like, I was doing the right thing. I was looking for relief, and the thing I went to for healing, it's like, oh, I just found myself reaching for greater trauma. And like you said, that applies pretty broad strokes to most men I know.
Right?
Right?
Yeah, we may have not been sitting in foxholes in Bastogne, fighting for freedom and fighting the Germans, fighting a physical enemy. But yeah, there's a lot of us who've been through trauma, and there's a spiritual enemy out there that's sometimes hard to see in the fog of war. And we're in a love story in the greater context of a war with an enemy who wants to kill, who wants to steal, and who wants to destroy. And we might not be able to see the physical tiger tanks of the Germans coming at us, but boy, the enemy comes with hatred, with guilt. How many times what's the increase in the rate of suicide in the past few years?
Right.
What's the increase, right? What's that pull and that destruction on our souls that's happening, with greater frequency through social media, and the hatred through girls and women. And, we could go on and on. The fatherlessness, it just, it's like, it's not hidden anymore. It's just apparent. And, what do you do? I mean, when your boots get blown up in the trauma, how are you going to get your feet warm? Is a
Right.
real question. And we'll get to this, but there's some resiliency that only comes through the presence of God that really the whole story points to. And Bastogne is a huge reminder of the battle going on for our own souls.
Yeah. And nobody wants to go to Bastogne, which is in Belgium, by the way. I just looked it up.
Very good.
But so this is a part of the Battle of the Bulge, right? Where the Allies have the Germans on their heels, and we're coming off an episode where we're Crossroads, where we looked really hard at what a great leader Winters is in so many ways. We discussed all this in the last episode, but again, at the last bit, as he's sitting there and he's working himself to death because he's giving himself, he cares so deeply for the men in his company and his group, the men he's responsible for, the men entrusted to his kingdom, that his friends, his best friends are just like, dude, you need to go to Paris. We got you a 2-day pass. And he goes there and he's got the flashbacks and of what he's seen and the trauma that he's been a part of. And we see that, like, when we come to this episode, it's almost like this is why that's needed. This is why that sort of that self-care, that soul care, that resilience is needed. But how can we find that in a world that is constantly bombarding us? This is the Battle of the Bulge, the last gasp of the German troops, of the German forces, of the German army. This is like basically, we will not go quietly into that night.
Right.
And they came actually really close to breaking through, which would have changed a lot of things.
Yeah, that's a good observation, Paul. I was just struck by the fact, Winters needed that soul care, but in the middle of the war, they're down to one bullet. Their greatest weapon was their presence. They didn't leave. They were freezing. They were dying. They were blown up. Their trees were exploding. Splinters and shards were being sent airborne into their skin, into their brothers.
Right.
And they got the VD. They got nasty wounds. Their guys are bleeding out. There's a point in the time where they're getting shot and they can't go save their brothers because of the hail of gunfire that are cutting down the men. They have to retreat back into their foxholes and back in their line. And Winters is doing everything he can to help those guys hold the line, even though a lot of them are bleeding out in front of them. And the guys that make it don't move. They don't leave. They don't run. How many guys today
send me to the back?
Right?
Right.
I mean,
3 hots on a cot, baby.
Yeah. The mountain, right? The mountains don't move. Even if you're scared, fearful, if there's bullets raining around you, the mountains don't move. You have to. These guys chose. That's why it's the greatest generation, right? They didn't move. They dug their heels in. They faced the cold, and it's and their greatest. I was just thinking about what their greatest weapon was. They didn't have anything. They didn't have. They were waiting for Patton, right, to come with the tanks, and they didn't have anything to take on the Tiger tanks. They just had themselves. So they had the fortitude to stay in the foxholes. And I just was thinking about what about their presence was so powerful. Well, I was reminded of Colossians 1:27, and I don't even know. I thought I had it pulled up here, but think about God chose to reside in us, in our hearts. In the new Eden, that Eden outpost, like that's where he chose to reside. And these guys, if you're a believer, you have it in you. And these guys' biggest weapon was their presence. It was their presence to stay in the foxhole, take bullets, take exploding shards of trees and the cold and the pain and the suffering, and have the faith that help was on its way. And I think sometimes as men, we find ourselves like Winters, like, I got to stay the course. That's my goal right now. That's my biggest weapon, is our presence to show up in the middle of trauma, the middle of pain, the middle of the dying and death, and hold the line of faith that help is on its way. And as believers in the kingdom with authority to clear spirits out and to practice spiritual warfare, and we do have authority to hold the line. And by God, the promises of the word and to fortify ourselves and to hold the line of faith that help is on its way. I think we have an active participation in fortifying and holding the line for the promises of God to come true. And just like Bastogne, when the suffering, there's tanks all around, like the opportunity as men to get around and in the minutes, and when your guy next to you is hurting, suffering, if it's loss of job, divorce, care, etc., and we can hold the line of faith, it's one of the greatest honors we get, and one if we don't back down from, God does some of the biggest miracles, biggest mysteries. He comes for his kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard my campus pastor several weeks ago told a story. He's sort of in the volunteer, what do they call it? Meeting in the morning before church. And he said something that was really interesting is the miracles always happen in the middle of a mess. Right?
Absolutely.
Miracles don't happen when you're kicking it in England, when you're welcomed by all the people in Holland, right? The miracles you got to have when you're at the end of your rope. And that's when God shows up. And I want to play the first clip is from early on. And you see Winters, such a leader. He's breaking through the ice in his canteen so he can shave. And any guy who's done a cold shave knows just what commitment that takes, because that is an unpleasant experience. And the general shows up. And he's like, tell it to me straight. What's going on? First voice you hear is the colonel. He's like, you guys know the general. And he wants basically a sit rep. What's going on? Tell me what it is. And his response, as he tells them the response and he's getting back in the Jeep, I think is what most men experience. Because, we could have wrapped it after 15 minutes of what you just said, Bryan, but we're like, well, how do we get there? Right? How do we connect to that Eden heart? How do we connect to the truth that God actually indwells us and gives us this strength when we're constantly under bombardment? And so as these the company commanders are sharing the reality of their situation, I want you guys to listen as you're listening to say, where do I feel like they're describing?
Acting Division Commander.
Give it to me straight.
We've been taking ground in one position, General, losing it in another. Now it looks like a standoff. We're digging in on the edge of the forest.
We're under sporadic artillery fire, General. We're taking a lot of hits and we have no aid station. We've run out of food, we have no winter clothes, and we have little or no ammo. Line spread's so thin, the enemy wanders into our CP to use our slit trenches, sir.
We just can't cover the line. Good morning, Captain Nixon. You got anything to add for General McCauley?
General. Yes, sir. General, I took a walk on our line at about 0300 last night. Couldn't find the 501st on our right flank. I tied it in with a squad from our 2nd platoon, but, sir, we've got some considerable gaps in our perimeter.
I don't have enough people, sir. We're spread too damn thin.
Hold the line, Colonel. Close the gaps. This goddamn fog won't lift anytime soon, so you can forget about air cover. Your 1st Battalion just pulled out of Foy. Krauts on their tail. Tanks, artillery, got no backup. There's a lot of shit heading this way.
All right. So, Bryan, I'm going to throw out these words that they used. We're gaining ground in some areas and losing ground in others. We're constantly under, he says sporadic fire, but it's unexpected, but it's liable to hit at any time. We're spread thin. Not enough food, not enough ammo, not enough clothes. We're alone. We're isolated. We can't connect to the unit that's supposed to be next to us. There's no hope of resupply. But hold the line, right? And that's, how do you like, I feel like the general's response is a response that many of us expect from God, from Father.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, life sucks. Shit's heading your way. Hold the line. And your response is with what and how?
That's a great question, Paul. I'm glad you teed this up. This is one that I've been working on in the last 3 to 5 years in our fires. Um, with and how. That's a great question. What I think spending time with God, in union with God, asking God to come, we consecrate our day, our hearts, our minds, our brothers, realizing we're in war when we can't see it, well, we can feel it, realizing that we're not fatherless, even though we may feel like a bastard, we may feel like a stepchild that's been ignored.
Mhm.
Those words, and those guys need care, they need brothers, and they need provision. In our spiritual life, we can try to listen to another sermon and try to be better and try to be good guys.
Right.
Or we can say, Jesus, would you come in the middle of my suffering? I invite you right now in the middle of my hurt, in the middle of my trauma. And I take a position where I need you to show up and invite you to invade my soul and to heal it. That's the secret weapon. Can we do that every day? Yeah, you can. It may not be 2 hours a day, but can it be a cadence of a lifestyle? Right. Jesus, come in the middle. I need healing. I need care that only you can provide. You're the creator of everything, and you chose to reside in me. I breathe your presence in, and I take the stance of faith to release all things and everyone to you. Right? That benevolent, lovingly detachment that
Right.
one of our wise sages has been teaching us how to do for the last 5 years. It's
Right.
John Eldridge and Morgan Snyder. I'm talking about you guys. But that benevolent detachment, it's a huge, 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 huge when and how do we do that in the middle of trauma. The other thing I'll say is what I've been learning about fires is your camaraderie. Are you going it alone? Jesus heals supernaturally fast in community. And it doesn't have to be 25, right? It can be 2. I got 2 and 3 I call when the chips are down, when I need help, when I've messed up a situation with my wife or my kids. I need to bounce something off. I by first names, I got them. I call Curtis. I call Joel. I call Jeremy. I call Mike. I call a few others. I got 5 or 6 guys. I got some backups. Oh yeah, we have some replacements just in case those are sick, of course. But if you're walking alone, Paul, go find a fire. There's a whole map of them. While the Heart's got them connected. Wild Courage. We have maps and people in East Coast, West Coast. But that's a supernatural way to increase your resilience right away. Besides, walk with your fire team. But in that resilience with God, repairing your union, being in union with God, that's the first step. How about you, Paul? Why and how? Where are you turning to? What's your frontier lately in this area?
Oh,
to throw it back on the host.
Such a rich question. It's interesting is that my guests and the people we talk to, they're saying stuff and they're triggering thoughts in my head that I start writing down. And one of the things I wrote down was we need somebody to give a shit. Right?
Yeah.
You talked earlier about that idea of the power of presence. And what does that colonel do, or what does that general do as soon as he hears their laundry list of problems? He gets in his Jeep and leaves. It's like, oh man, will someone give a shit about my problems? And this other idea that I've been sort of wrestling with, that willpower does not bring transformation. Working harder, trying harder, chasing more is only going to exhaust you. And as you sort of brought this up earlier, this idea of surrender, the will, again, I think John Eldridge brought this up. The will was meant to be surrendered. But in surrender is where refreshment comes, is where recovery comes. But that's not our nature, right? That's not our sin nature, at least. Our true nature, our true self, the temple, right? it's in the New Testament, our hearts are the new temple of God. God indwells us and we have access, but we have to actually access it. And how do we do that? It's in those daily practices. It's interesting, dude, you just got done driving 7 hours. I've spent most of the day with my grandson, but as we're sitting outside, he loves being outside. So I started a fire, right? I started a fire. I'm smoking a cigar. He's digging, throwing sticks in the fire, having fun. And I get my little alert, as you just mentioned, from my pause app saying, hey, you're on a 6-day streak. So I was like, Kason, come over here. It's like, all right. And so I'm sitting in a chair and I put my arms around him and we listen to a 1-minute pause.
Let's go.
And I was like, he doesn't necessarily know. I was like, but you know what he's doing? He's taking deep breaths along with Papa.
Well done, Paul. Well done.
And we get on this call and we're what the world says. And you got to, I'm going to be honest. There was a few moments today where I was like, man, I hope Bryan cancels. Right. And I'm sure that you felt the same way. It's like, man, we should reschedule. We should do it again. And yet we get on this call and we find we find refreshment. We find
100%.
joy. We find, man, we're going to walk off this call new men, right?
Yeah.
And it is in that. And, the links for that, I mean, you go to wildatheart.org/fires and you find all the stuff. And if there's not one in your area, guess what? It's super easy to do it. Like you can sign up to be a host and all it takes is one guy to say, hey, you want to meet up? Let's just talk about stuff that actually matters and not football, not our golf scores, not politics. Like talk about your life, because that's what you said is it's all about the presence. And that's what Winners does so awesomely well. And they show it as he's watching Eugene struggle through this movie or through this clip, through this episode. He sees it and he's there. The guys suffer a loss and he just sits down with his men. Doesn't say anything. There's no great words of wisdom. He just sits there with them. And just recently, I had something happen, dealing with a friend of mine who has pancreatic cancer. And this is one of my best friends from college. And I've talked about it on the podcast. And something one day just ripped apart because I felt like God was saying, let him go. Not like in a morbid way, but there's stuff unearthed. You asked what was Frontier. There was stuff unearthed in that event that it's not even about my friend who's been with me for 3 decades. It's about this deeper thing that I'm still unraveling. And I had 2 of my best friends now who are in my fire every Tuesday night catch me as I'm going to my knees because I break. Like I make ugly cry look pretty, and because that's how much I broke in that moment. And I'm still working through, God, what happened? Because I don't understand what that meant, but I know that healing and resupply is on the other side.
Paul, thanks for sharing that. That's a really fresh, data point of the heart. Thanks for bringing that up. I love that you pointed out that you had shared leadership. Like the guys in Bastogne, Winners sat down with them. He was in the trenches with them. He didn't drive away. He didn't get lost on the front lines and stumble away and hide because he didn't hide. One of the leaders in the Bastogne episode was walking around the line acting like he didn't know, acting like where he is going was anywhere but close to the action or close to his men, and he ends up
we'll talk about
lost.
Lieutenant Dyke next episode for sure.
Okay. Right. But to come back to your heartfelt, what you're going through right now, your Frontier, having that leadership together, that suffering leadership, the guys that aren't going to leave, the guys that are there to catch you. Like, kudos to your friends who are there. That's what getting around a fire, sharing our story, being seen, and seeing the guy next to you. It wasn't in a group of 50 or a group of 50,000 at some mega church. It was in your backyard, right? I mean, that's where the real life is. The brotherhood is to walk with each other, so we can repair our union with God, because we don't have all the answers. We can spiral in that question, that 3-letter question, why. If we think on why too hard, it can become very unhealthy and can lead us to some areas that we're just not designed to handle right now. And I just wanted to tell you, good job. Good job. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Paul.
Yeah, man. As we talk about this podcast, and I've shared this story, I think, a couple of times now, but it's like what I want it to sound like is almost an intimate relationship between two good friends. And, we don't contact each other a lot, but we have the same heart, right? We're heading in the same direction. And so the listeners get to eavesdrop on stuff that's like, oh my gosh, this is bringing life to me. It's bringing life to you, and hopefully bringing life to whoever listens of, man, I'm not alone in this. I struggle just that way. Or even just saying, what is it like to have a frontier? What is it like? Everybody's Bastogne is different. But that list that I went, you feel like you're gaining ground somewhere, but you're losing ground somewhere else. You're spread too thin. There's constant bombardment for your time, for your attention, for your affection. And where are you spending it? I've noticed, again, going back to frontier, is I've noticed I am much more reluctant. I'm actually carving stuff away.
Yeah.
Stuff that I actually want to do, because I'm like, no, my grandson actually needs my attention more.
Yeah.
It's like my friends need my attention more. As much as I'd love to go lead this team at church and to work on this amazing project, like that fills my false self. But my heart's still left in Bastogne, frozen.
Yeah. You're cracking it open today, Paul. And I just thinking about the areas that, do we leave them in Bastogne frozen, or do we get around 2 or 3 guys to actually see us in our story? Like you said, I drove home. I drove up 8 hours of Coeur d'Alene to see Rocky Mountain play Coeur d'Alene High School in 5A football. And my son plays for Rocky Mountain and had a really good game, but they end up losing. And all the work, the off-season training, the speed and agility, the lifting weights, everything, all the hard work that got put into came to an end last night about 10:30.
It's brutal.
And so, and then people say, "Oh, it's just a football game." Well, when these guys are training all year round and putting the type of effort and reps and strategy and staying eligible by getting good grades and doing the things they have to do to get on that field, and it comes to an end, it's kind of shot. Like we're bewildered, we're a little confused. Like, okay, what do we do next? We don't have a game to go to next Friday for the first time in
so disruptive.
since August 18th. Yeah, we're disrupted, and it's a little lighter subject matter of the heart than friends, with pancreatic cancer. So I'm not making light of that, but at the same time, when there's a disruption of the heart, what do we do? Do we just dive right in and don't feel it, and we just fake it, or do
pivot to the next thing, right?
Yeah, just bump it along, or do we take a pause for a minute and say, why am I so disrupted? What's that revealing about the story that God is the hero in? Like, where is he providing care? As a dad, I have unfinished business in football. I played college football. I played high school football. We were on this, we were in a state championship in 1995, and we were on the 1 yard line, and with 1 minute to go, and we're down 7-0, and we hand the ball off 3 times in a row. and we thought we were in all 3 times, and the referees disagreed. And this is we didn't have challenge flags, Paul. Okay, and we all put our hands up, we 3 times in a row, and we lost. And the referees didn't agree, and that's something that sat open. And I know
Right.
from those, it's a football game, but from all that work that went into it, there's a lot of agreements that can come up in our heart, like, oh, God didn't come through for me. Oh, or why am I suffering? Why did we put all this work and then not get across? Why didn't we get 1 yard? We needed 1 yard to be the state champions, and it doesn't happen. And at the time when you're 17, you don't, there's not as much perspective as we have now, or life experience, or just relationship with God. But if I would have had another brother like you, or like Morgan, somebody on the phone in my band of brothers to say, hey, it's okay. You did the best. You're good. It's okay that you're a yard short. You know what? You're gonna give your heart time to feel that. Let's invite God in to help us interpret that. But it's okay, and that's freaking hard to validate my pain. One of the things we do in fires, we validate each other.
Right.
Like we just did here, right?
Right.
And sometimes it's about validating places, yet the younger places, the 17-year-old Bryan who lost the state championship. Jesus, you can validate that pain from a football game? Yeah, he can. And he did.
20 plus years later, right?
Yes. And I'm sitting there the way home today, thinking about my experience with football, watching my son's end. And we got to stand next to a chain link fence with the bright lights on. It's 10:39. We're freezing, but I just gave him a hug.
Yeah.
Looked in his eyes. I gave him everything I wish I would have had when I was 17 and my season ended. And the world said, oh, you're a failure because you got second. But I got to look in his eyes and say, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
You gave everything you had. Even though you lost on the scoreboard, you won in your heart. Don't overlook this. Don't let disappointment rob the accomplishment of where you're at. And to be able to offer something that you didn't have in your story to somebody else in their young story is priceless. And I'm going to offer to our listeners that probably only happens if you're walking with God and letting him reinterpret and heal the parts of your younger self that may have gone through the similar trauma, so you can then give it away healed. It's magical.
Right.
And I don't know what that has to do with Bastogne.
Well,
but yeah.
I think that's such a beautiful moment that you were able to be there. You drove 7 hours each way, right?
Yes, sir.
But to be able to do that, and what that says, that his 17-year-old heart can't understand, but it receives. Like, he doesn't know what he receives until later. Like, you didn't know the trauma, right? Watching your kids go through sports awaken all those younger places in yourself that went through sports. And it was with 2 boys in football and all that stuff. I was like, you guys are handling it sitting on the bench so much better than I did. Because I am feeling like a 17-year-old up in the stands.
Yeah.
But to be there, and because that last game of the season is powerful. Like, that's the last game he's going to play with the seniors. Like, they're leaving. And it has weight for them. And, you mentioned that moment in the 1995 championship game, right? That's a Bastogne moment for your 17-year-old heart.
Right.
And we don't have a God who drives away in a Jeep.
Mm.
We don't have a God who's like, let me just take you out of this and take you back to England, take you back to France where it's nice and safe and party all the time. We have a God who shows up in our Bastogne moments, even if it's decades later.
Yeah.
If we let him. So what does that look like, Bryan, to let him? Like, how do we let him? You got a vacuum going on?
That might have been a call from heaven. I hope not. I don't know what that is. How do we let him? How do we let him? That's a great question.
Well, I have a thought as you're thinking about it, because the really interesting thing that struck me is we're talking about the importance of fires. the importance of brotherhood, the importance of gathering and sharing your story, being seen and seeing others. They lit a fire in this episode.
Yes, they did.
And it pulled everyone in. Maybe not everyone, but, the key characters, Nixon showed up, Winters showed up. They're like, wow, we really shouldn't be having a fire, but it drew them in. And of course, the bombardment happened about 30 seconds later, but that there's a power, there's a magnetism to it that when you're making yourself accessible and available, it's going to attract others. Just like me hearing your voice on that podcast, I was like, oh man, I need to talk to Bryan. And so, not to say that's how we do it, but I think that's sort of a gateway to partnering with others. I promise, returning for home.
I know. Can we pause for a minute and I can take care of that? Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to pause for 1 sec. All right, Paul.
All right, hang on. Because I got another kind of, if we're playing tennis, I got another ball to serve you up.
Okay.
Because that idea, like the men in this company, the men of Easy Company, were good. Again, we've heard their situation. They said on October, at the very end of the episode, they said on December 26, 1944, General Patton's Third Army broke through the German lines, allowing supplies to flow in and the wounded to be evacuated. The story of the Battle of the Bulges told today is one of Patton coming to the rescue of the encircled 101st Airborne. No member of the 101st has ever agreed that the division needed to be rescued. So going back to that original question, how do we become men who don't need to be rescued?
Oh, it's a loaded question. Paul.
Right. That's a whole other, it's like we could start a part 2 of the podcast just on that question.
Yeah. Let's talk about the men for a minute. And I'll come back to answer that question. What struck me, and I think about the closest friends I have and who relationships I've developed and poured into and fostered, nurtured, cultivated in the last decade. This is the last decade. And some of the ones that keep going for over decades, the friends that supersede 30, 40, 4 decades. And I'm 47, so 4 decades and 7 years. I got, 5 or 6 friends that supersede all those decades and never left.
That's awesome.
And yeah, very rich in that area. The local guys in the last decade who run with me, and I'm just thinking about the guys in that are very much like the guys in Bastogne. They're not going away. They're showing up with heroic consistency. Again and again, no death, no life. It's almost like a vow, right? Like where God goes, they will go. They will never not show up for each other, for me. These guys they're consistent. We may not see each other for a year because of travel, life, but we get right back. We are right back into I can trust them. They can trust me. We show up for each other. It's rare. It's something you got to fight for. It's, but it starts with, are they confident in themselves? Are they the quality and kind of men that are humble enough to say, when I'm not doing something right, someone can call me out and I can correct and I can get back to the truth. I mean, these men, it's rare. I got 5 or 6 guys like that who will show up no matter what, who will drive up mountains, who will stop what they're doing, who will answer the call at 3 a.m. But first of all, they got to love themselves enough to show up for themselves. They got to do what they say. They got to do what they have to tend their wives' hearts, their kids' hearts. They have to show up and be true and not pose, not put on the poser with all the heart language, but they got to show up for themselves and go all in and be the guy who shows up again and again and again. And those guys in Bastogne, they didn't, one of their leaders is getting lost and hiding away from the fight. Right. They're not moving. They got trench foot. They got VD. They're peeing icicles and razor blades. Right. And some of the guys, right, he needs new boots. He still doesn't get out of the foxhole. The power of their presence is in their heroic consistency. They show up again and again and again. And to be that kind of man, I mean, bet there for our listeners, like, go there, do what you say. If you just do what you say, think about that for a moment, Paul. If you just do what you say, you got to carry some core values. We talk about wild courage all the time.
Yeah.
Humility, hope, honor. You got to share your story. You got to be able to hear others. But if you come in low enough with enough humility that someone else can call you out and you can say, you know what, you're right, and you can self-correct, that's the kind of brotherhood we have. That's the kind of honesty we want to run with. I'm not perfect in it, but it's the type of humility we want to run with that can become those type of men. And I think that's part of the journey we're all on. I'm not perfect by any means, but boy, in the last decade, I think I've tightened up my game with my friends, knowing that I got to show up and I got to do what I say. I can't talk a big game and then not show up and be that guy. Everybody knows that guy. There's plenty of them. You know what? It might be time to get rid of those dudes and up your game to be the guy that shows up with consistent heroism for God, our union with God, for our families, for our kids, and then the few friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And being willing to say, yeah, it's okay to be like 2 or 3, maybe
Right?
5. It doesn't have to be a billion. It doesn't have to be everyone. But hey,
How thin?
you know what?
Yeah, how thin are you? If it's 25,
Right.
how deep is your soul? How
It's like
deep
you
is your
can't
life?
show up for 25 dudes.
No.
You can show up for maybe 2 or 3. Like legitimately actually show up. I love that what you said. Be who you say. I mean, take a minute. Talking to my listeners here because Bryan and I are about to wrap up. But take a minute. What sort of man do you want to be? What do you want your wife to say about you? What do you want your kids to say about you? I'm letting the rest of the world go because that's the most important place to start. And you can't get away with bullshit with them because they see right through it. Yeah, you say this, but that's not how you really act around the house. Start there and say, am I who I want to be? And if not, how do I move in that direction? And remember, it's not going to happen through willpower. It's going to happen through surrender. And typically it's surrendering pride. It's going to be surrendering need for respect, need for control, need to appear a certain way. You say, you know what matters? My wife's heart, my kid's heart, my brother's heart. All the rest is just bullshit that we can get through. That we take to Jesus, right? We say, Jesus, this hurt. Catch my heart. I texted my group and I was like, hey, I'm really struggling. I'm showing up for my wife, but my heart's not in it. And the guy was his prayer was, Jesus, catch his heart. And in that moment to say, Jesus, catch my heart, when you're in those Bastogne moments where that's all you can say as your buddies hopefully are catching you as you're going to your knees. Yeah. Because it's always when you get injured, your buddies are carrying you out. You're not walking back to the aid station by yourself. You need a Jeep. You need somebody to carry you. You need somebody else's supplies typically because you've all given it up.
Paul, I was just thinking about when you're rolling this way, sometimes you have to be humble enough to rip off all the things that you think that you're putting on to make people think you got it all together. And
that you think matters.
Say that, yeah, right. You think matters. Is it, it might be the shiny car, it might be the fake bank account. It could be your relationship's supposed to be awesome and it might not be. You got to get to the heart of the matter. For me recently, my frontier in this is, I wasn't having success getting through to one of my sons in a parental guidance situation. Obviously, I can't get too detailed to protect his heart, but I had to seek counsel. I wasn't coming through. I was overbearing. I have a tendency to be high energy, do it now, command and control. And if you do too much command and control in your relationships, it's going to come back to bite you as it did me. And so I had to seek guidance, and I went to a counselor by the name of Gail, and Gail's a 69-year-old former missionary who walks with the Lord and is not afraid to tell you how things are. And so she
My
also
therapist says I'm not a prostitute. I don't get paid to make you feel good.
So that's a, her calendar better be full, because that's the type of people you need in your
Right.
life. And if you're
Yeah.
paying somebody, you want the truth, not to feel good. I love it. And Gail's a similar way with me. And she just said, you got two choices. You can go alone in this and go very fast and be successful and be shiny and strong and be very powerful and be an asshole, and then be alone, very, very isolated. And you'll be at the finish line with probably plenty of money and probably plenty of power, but you won't have anybody around you because you walked all over them because you're so aggressive and so brutal. Or you can slow down and be aware and take notice and look at their hearts and listen and breathe and take another way and join and ask them to come with you. Don't just dominate and say, look at me. Say, come with me and share the adventure and invitation. And that whole choice has been really life-giving, to slow down for the alphas that might be listening. Breathe in and breathe out, maybe slow down and do a little more inviting versus a little more showing off, a little less flexing for those of us who fit the A category for the alpha. It's been life-giving to slow down, to just be the slow and steady and be aware of where that false crap might be coming up. And, but again, being humble enough to go to a 69-year-old gal from the missionary field who walks with the Lord, who's not going to make you feel good. Instead values you enough to tell you the truth. That's where I'm lately. And, I think that's part of becoming that man, that you're talking about.
As we wrap this up, I go back to that original thought, the power of your presence. And Bryan, I just want to say I appreciate your presence here tonight. Not just your physically being able, but to bring your heart for your boys, for God, because that's what we need in Bastogne. When we're in our Bastones, we need the presence not just of our brothers, but going back to that question, how do we become that guy? We need to tap into the presence of God.
Absolutely.
And if we're not feeling it, that does not diminish the truth that it's there. Like you said, going back to Colossians, the Christ in you, Christ in us is the hope of glory. Christ in us is what gets us through. And how do we tap into that? Well,
right, Paul, I just got to read that. I got to read that.
Yeah, man.
Colossians 1:27. To them, God chose to make known how great among the Gentiles are the riches of the glory of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. For God wanted them to know that the riches and glory of Christ are for you Gentiles too. And this is the secret, that Christ lives in you. Sit on that for a minute.
Right. So that's how we get through Bastogne, to realize that God's not going to he's not going to pull us out. He's not going to helicopter in medevac. Evacuation routes are cut off, right?
Yeah.
We're not going back from the front. We're still in the situation, but Christ is present. And in his presence, he sends people. We'll see people show up. And Bryan, I just wanted to thank you for not just being here in your presence tonight, but how you show up for the guys in your fires and how you show the way to find greater life, greater heart, more complete, right? You're helping guys find their hearts. And that's as Eugene knows, is a very thankless job. We didn't talk about Eugene nearly as much, right?
Eugene's the medic.
Eugene's the medic. And he's always outside the circle, but he's always pouring into the guys around him. He's giving his chocolate away. He's giving his treasures away, because the greatest gift that we have is a healing touch. And the only way we can do that is to be connected to Christ. And that's what gives us the power to do that when we're feeling depleted, when we're feeling thin, we feel surrounded.
Paul,
So
thank you
thank
so
you.
much. Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. I think we went a little bit different direction than we did. Totally focusing on Bastogne, but focusing on the presence of God within us, healing that union with Him, and
Mm,
walking with Him to tap into that resilience. It's just been a pleasure. And
yeah.
for your listeners, if you haven't watched the Battle of Bastogne and the Band of Brothers, it's a good time to do that, and especially in the context of what you just heard.
Yeah. And because we're all headed, as our next episode is, the breaking point. And that's when, as they say, the shit really hits the fan. You know, what's the general say? Shit's heading your way. And it is. And, you know, this is really where the series shifts, because along this way, it's been sort of uplifting. And was like, no, it's hard. And our masculine initiation is hard. And as we'll go to in a future episode, but there's a fight that makes it worth it. So just once again, Bryan, just thank you so much for your time, for sharing your heart. And I'm super glad neither one of us canceled.
Absolutely. Paul, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
So this has been Paul McDonald and Bryan Byrd talking about Band of Brothers, Bastogne. Go check it out. And I hope you join us next time as we continue our series on Band of Brothers with the breaking point here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Tide has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before.